Segon, Bojo, Pitekwe, Tawau, welcome. Welcome to everyone who's tuning in this evening, and gratitude to our alumni. 550 alumni registered for this event, which is amazing. So thank you for attending online, and thank you for continuing to stay activated and engaged with the Queen's community. Queen's is absolutely blessed to have such active alumni supporting our university. And I also want to say thank you to the assembled group here, IRL. Everyone know what that means? It took me years to figure out that it wasn't Earl, but it means in real life. So very lovely to have you here. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land that the university stands on and thank the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people for their continued welcome, their patience, their teachings, their stewardship, and for taking care of all our students from all over the world while they're here at Queen's. I have a land acknowledgement from a friend, a late friend named Harold Johnson, who was a Cree writer and lawyer, who said that if you're ever really stuck for a land acknowledgement, there's nothing wrong with saying, hello, land, hello, water, hello, trees, hello, birds. So I'm acknowledging all the creatures that are here as well, including us two-leggeds. So where are we? We're here in the Polson Room. This is the old co-ed lounge, one of the few rooms in the John Deutsch University Center where women were actually permitted. Co-ed has such an antique ring to it these days, but in those days it was very exciting. And since 1927, this building has been a home for student government and student life at Queen's. And after an extensive and rather extended renovation, the JDUC finally reopened, and it's thanks to innovative student support that this has become a transformational place and the home for student government and clubs. We have a Taylor Swift club. Did you know that? I want to join. I just think that's incredibly cool. With spaces for undergraduates and graduate students, student wellness, and residents. It's a hub built by students for students. So I welcome the students who are here this evening and the students watching online. Thank you for your support. So I've looked forward to an occasion like this since I became Chancellor 2 years ago. And imagine sitting with a university leader, respected nationally and internationally, and being able to have a conversation about the present role of universities, and ours in particular, the future aspirations of Queen's, and where we fit into the global picture. So you will be among the first to know where Queen's is leading, where Queen's is heading, and how Queen's is shaping what's coming next. Patrick Deane is his name, and he became our principal in July of 2019. And he came from broad and deep experience in universities across the country, including McMaster, the University of Winnipeg, and indeed Queen's. President Deane represents Queen's at the Council of Ontario Universities and the U15 group of Canadian research universities. Our principal is the president of the Governing Council for the Magna Charta Observatory. Charta, you're good. An international group of 900 post-secondary signatories committed to promoting and defending institutional autonomy and academic freedom in universities. Patrick was also the very first recipient of the John Polanyi Prize for Literature. And all of this has led to where he is now, building our reputation at home and abroad and shaping our future. I am delighted. I feel I shouldn't be welcoming you, but here he is. Could we give Patrick Deane a warm round of applause?
Thanks very much, Sheila. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you all here.
Yeah, it is. It's terrific. Patrick, I think one of the things that I would like to explore a little bit with you is where literature has fit in to where you are now. And in particular, you studied George Orwell, who was all about truth. I know that you've said literature and your study of it is responsible. It's responsible for you, and we owe literature a great debt, I think. But how does that fit into your life?
Well, it's an interesting question. A number
Thank
of years
goodness.
ago, wouldn't want to start with a boring one. A number of years ago, a PhD candidate from the University of Toronto was doing a study of university leaders and spoke to my colleague at the U of T, and then thought, well, I should talk to a few others. So he came to see me and asked that question. What in your academic background prepared you to do this job? And I said to him, the reading of literary texts. He looked completely nonplussed by this idea. I did not have the Harvard School behind me. I did not have a kind of a university management training thing. It was that notion of the negotiations that you conduct as a reader, as a writer, as a critic of literature, which makes you attentive to discourses of all kinds. And I think, everything about the university is in some sense a narrative. The budget is a narrative. We talk about the profile of the university and what it seeks to achieve, its strategic plan. That is a narrative too. So these are all things that literary people are trained to be thoughtful about and to, one hopes, engage with in a nuanced way. So I did used to feel bad about my lack of training in accounting and things like that, but I've now come to the conclusion that experts can do that. I can do the particular thing that literature has equipped me to do. You mentioned Orwell. My field is literature and politics and the intersection between those things. And I think the extraordinary lesson from Orwell is about the uses to which language can be put to political purpose that often have the effect of estranging language from people's day-to-day reality. And I think that's a very interesting insight, if one thinks of his essay on politics in the English language, in view of current political developments, particularly on this continent, but elsewhere as well.
I love the Orwell quote, the past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, and the lie became the truth.
Yes.
And we're operating in, post-truth was the 2016 phrase of the year for the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yeah.
How does a university, and one of the foundations is the pursuit of truth, function in a world that is post-truth?
I think the advent of a post-truth climate is hugely threatening and damaging to what a university stands for and what it seeks to do. I think a colleague talks about the current crisis facing universities as a very fundamental one because it is an epistemological crisis. So, a new technology is one thing. Demographics of student demand and so on, that's another thing. Shifting emphases on STEM programs relative to humanities, these are all things that universities adapt to. But an assault on one's ability to understand what is true and what is not true, and how to distinguish between those things, is a very fundamental assault for places that are premised on discovery and, if not the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of the closest thing we have to truth at any given moment. So it does strike very much at the heart of what universities are about. Now, does that matter? It matters to the extent that it becomes current in the culture at large. It matters to the extent that it becomes a preoccupation of governments, or that post-truth world becomes the normal world in which public activities and relations are conducted. Then it does become hugely problematic. And we've seen recently in the US how a government wishing to do what that Orwell quote says, which is alter people's not only understanding but memory of history and the circumstances they are living and working in. That assault turns directly onto universities. And we've been spared that in this country. But it is, I think, a frightening thought. And I think every university has to think what they shall do. Every university leader needs to think what they shall do when that question is asked of them by society. And how should I put this? The society as a whole fails to trust the university to be the curator and the seeker of truth.
What does that do to a country that is a democracy?
It's a fundamental challenge, because in many ways what goes on in a university is a rehearsal for and a training for the exercise of democratic process. Academic freedom, the right to speak out, the right to contest ideas, all of these things are fundamental to the democratic process. And the moment you shut down those things, then the ability of universities to contribute to a healthy democracy is constrained. And I think that is, again, one of the really frightening messages of the current moment, that those constraints are starting to be felt.
When you're overseas talking with your fellow principals, presidents, what are they telling you about this particular moment and that particular threat?
The globe is not homogeneous in this respect. If you go to Europe, I spoke at a conference in Prague on universities and democracy this time last year. There's a lot of shared concern about these issues. On the other hand, in the global south, it's a somewhat different set of challenges to the university. But I think what's occurring right now is a great deal of work being done to build solidarity between institutions that do feel under threat in this way. It's more widely spread than I think I would ever have suspected, this assault on universities through the assault on truth, or the notion of some kind of achievable, objectively understood truth.
When we talk about truth, my head goes to truth and reconciliation, as you may suspect. I was an honorary witness to the work of the TRC, and Queen's presented its own report in 2017, the TRC task force here. Where would you say Queen's is on its journey to truth and reconciliation?
I think, like all institutions in this country, we have a ways to go, a considerable ways to go. I think we're unclear on the meaning of some of the things we declare we would like to do.
Such as?
The decolonization of the institution, for example. It seems necessary and admirable in the context of reconciliation in this country. But exactly what it means to an institution that is to its roots Western in its epistemological assumptions is challenging. And I think we've made very significant steps forward in a lot of respects. I think we're now in the position of having to deal with the most difficult ones. And those are the ones that have to do with different ways of knowing and the impact of that on curriculum, on the pedagogical process, for example, all of those things. It comes down, I think, to a dilemma about how we understand the metaphor of the two-row wampum, or the two canoes proceeding in parallel down the river. Because interestingly, in institutions of this sort, the two cultures are not separate, they are intermixed. And so the challenge is working out what the appropriate relationship should be between those cultures in this kind of a context. The biggest challenge, I think, with decolonization, with reconciliation, even with the steps forward for inclusion and equity, the greatest challenge is that the institution has to change. you cannot embrace these things without becoming something different. And I'm not sure that, in general, universities in the Western tradition are amenable to that change or to the degree of change that might be necessary.
Just before I leave this topic, I think that universities proved over the pandemic they can change, and they can change very quickly when they want to.
Yes.
So it's about amenability.
Yes, about whether you have any choice too. I think with COVID, and I do remember that. One day I had no idea what a Teams meeting was.
I still don't.
And I actually remember thinking that the most serious thing we might have to deal with was the supply of hand sanitizer for the next week or two after Parliament went home and we decided there was a pandemic underway. And what is amazing is that in the ordinary scheme of things, I'm going to use my lack of experience with Teams as a metaphor here. In the ordinary scheme of things, if you said to me, now you have to learn how to use Teams, it would probably have taken me a couple of months to actually get to the last module and so on. We learned in a day during COVID, in the onset of COVID. So it is true. But remember, I mean, the challenge there was, it was a health challenge, but it was also a practical challenge. A challenge to one's identity is a different thing. A challenge to one's understanding of the forms of knowledge is very much more difficult. I mean, it's something people have to grow into or grow out of preconceptions of one sort or another. So I think universities, I think it is true that universities can be very slow to change. They're not bad at changing for practical reasons. They are very slow to change when the issues that stand at the very heart of the university are under question. One's identity, one's culture, things of that sort.
Systemic change, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get to the bicentennial vision, and there were pre-submitted questions from you in the audience about the bicentennial vision. And I want to ask you about what the centennial vision was in 1941 and how that might have informed what you're thinking about our bicentennial in 2041.
Yes, well, it certainly did. People who read my discussion paper that triggered the bicentennial discussion will remember I spent quite a bit of time talking about Principal Wallace, after whom the hall next door to us is named, who was the principal at the time in 1941 when the university celebrated its centennial. You can just imagine, I mean, the circumstances were interesting, and there are more parallels than one is happy to admit between 2020 now and 1941. There, the university was contemplating its next century in the context of a war. And what is quite interesting about it is that much of what was discussed at the same time is still in the air now. I remember reading a note from Principal Wallace in which he spoke about the likely emphasis on STEM. He didn't call them STEM disciplines, but that's what he meant when soldiers returned from the war and would all want to enroll in university, and there would be a demand for science-based disciplines and in the professional schools. Not unlike the present moment in which, at various levels of government, a shift towards STEM has been diagnosed or ordained in the province. So it was a similar time in that respect. If I could speak as the literary person I am in a somewhat more abstract way, though, to pondering an upcoming second century in the context of a global conflict is a very, very interesting thing psychologically. And I think in a weird way, we're in a similar situation in that, yes, you know, there are very serious conflicts around the world, but this issue you raised at the start, the assault on truth, the post-truth society and so on, these things are war of a different kind, but they do have a parallel effect on the universities. So it is especially difficult to think about your second 100 years in that context, when AI in the minds of some portends the imminent demise of universities as we know them. So it's a time of great instability that is not without its parallel. In 1941, the war wasn't won yet. And there were many, many question marks over the future of this place, over Canadian culture, and over democracy in the world. So it's a very suggestive comparison, I think.
You mentioned AI. You did it first.
Oh,
there were a lot of questions regarding AI and how we're preparing our students to deal with a world where AI may be taking jobs that they had expected to get. My own stepson was a coder, and he's now looking for work. He went to Lakehead, got a degree in computer engineering, and that job is now kind of over to AI. So how do we prepare our students to go out into this, if you'll forgive me, brave new world?
The mention of Brave New World does provoke a shudder too. Yeah, it's a very good question, which I can't pretend to really be able to answer particularly effectively. I think as an institution, we have responded appropriately to what AI is. This is old news, but we avoided the knee-jerk reaction to outlaw it, to dwell in an anxious way about how it threatens so much of what the university stands for. I think there's a recognition that AI is here to stay. It is a fact of life, and our obligation is to ensure that students understand the tool, know how to use it, know how to keep abreast of it, and especially know the ethical implications, ethical and other implications that surround AI. So as the technology changes, these things will become more and more complex. But I think in general, the university is on the right track here. What's interesting is that we recently heard at the board a presentation about AI and the likely scenario we would be facing, or society will be facing in a number of years. And one of the implications of that was that if AI was able to take over as much of what is needed to be done in the culture as seems likely, what is it that's taught in the universities that can be depended upon? And the individual giving the talk spoke about the formation of human beings, right? Which in a place like this is linked with the interpersonal relationships that are developed, the way in which the Queen's community historically has functioned. But especially interestingly, it throws you back on the arts and on the practice of the arts. Because although I often look at, let's say an AI, not reproduction, but fake Caravaggio painting, and it can be very exercised by it. It's not so much the artifact itself that's interesting in this context as the process of making art, which might be a way in which, that is, it seems to me, an irreplaceable human activity, which we might, surprisingly, given what I just said about the drift towards STEM, find itself one consequence of this extremely advanced technology.
I think that will be music to a lot of people's ears right now. Some of the questions that were sent in, and we're very grateful for them, were about how safe are arts and humanities programs at Queen's in this era.
I would say it's a matter of urgency that they be safe and preserved and developed. But I think an interesting point about this is that, speaking as a humanist myself, we often delude ourselves that our disciplines have not changed over time. I'm an English prof. English departments didn't exist before Cambridge in the 20s. Now they look like something else, and they will cease to exist in the form I knew them. And that's right, and it seems proper as the discipline evolves. So this is a bit of a long-winded way of making the point that I think the thing in the arts that we need in the age of AI is not just the arts as we have known them historically, but it's the arts informed by and thoughtful about and engaged with a world in which AI exists. That could manifest itself as cave painting, but it could manifest itself as something completely different.
We are sitting in a room where we have the Dean of Law. Colleen Flood is here, and law offers a course in AI and the law. Can you envision other faculties engaging in that way?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think let's not misunderstand what I said earlier on. I think to accept, embrace, and work with AI requires embracing the ways in which it can transform a whole professional field, right? You want to educate your students in that because it will change the field. And so we want lawyers who understand AI and understand the legal implications of AI as well as the practice of law in the context of AI, where AI is one of the tools. So yeah, absolutely. I think I welcome what technology can bring if it improves the way in which we do many, many human things, professional or otherwise. I think my earlier comments are really about what remains in the context of the university curriculum that is uniquely, I shouldn't say resistant to AI, but separate from it.
And what would that be?
Human formation through the production of art and through interpersonal relationships.
A very good question from a member of our alumni community is, what is the role of in-person learning at Queen's?
Well, this institution has had a remarkable history of producing astonishing people. And one of the things that has produced them is the odd pressure cooker that it is. Students all living close to campus, enjoying that close in-person contact. And I think that is, people refer to it as the secret sauce of Queen's, and it undoubtedly is somewhere in the mix that produces exceptional people who come out of this institution. And I remember during COVID when there was a lot of gloomy speculation that when COVID was over, we'd all be online and all of university would be now a kind of a mediated remote experience. I remember thinking, well, the thing Queen's should do is simply double down on the in-person, because that, in one way or another, has been fundamental to our success as an institution for a long time, and that's got to continue. I mean, everything in the bicentennial vision is a construction upon a history of strength at the university. So, yes, the bicentennial vision talks about societal impact. We're an institution that's had a remarkable impact in this country. So the challenge is to think about what that impact looks like in the next, for the next century. So similarly, I think it's, what am I trying to say here? The human magic that has been characteristic of this place has to continue and has to be maintained, regardless of how our mission is recast because of the technological and other pressures of the upcoming century. I believe that, actually. And I'm not a grad of Queen's, but I see it at work.
Was it fun to put together the bicentennial vision?
the conversation was wonderful. Here, a nod of thanks to Nick Mosey, who did so much work on it. What was wonderful about it were the conversations, which I would say began in a period of uncertainty and mistrust. They began in the period after our significant budget challenges. And one point of the bicentennial vision was to say, okay, yes, there's all that stuff to deal with, but we need, at a time like this, to think about what we want from the institution in the long term. And we set about having that conversation, which then lasted about a year. And the discussions modulated very nicely from suspicion and anxiety at the start to a higher degree of constructive engagement to enthusiasm at the end of the process. Yeah, it was wonderful. It reminded me, I have to say, of the conversation that lay behind the Queen's strategic framework, which was approved in 2020 or thereabouts. Hearing from people what they valued in the institution, what they wanted to see it do, was very exciting.
I want to ask you about your global committees and involvements that you have and how they inform your leadership here at Queen's.
I believe this institution is an institution of global significance. But I don't believe, and this would be true of many Canadian institutions, I don't believe we've historically conceived of ourselves sufficiently as having a global mission. An accidental global mission in the sense that the local has a knock-on effect globally. But I think the many virtues of this institution have been not really viewed in a global context. I want to see if I can get this year right. I think it's 2021-22. We had a review of our global engagement strategy done through the International Association of Universities. And that led to the creation of what is now the Global Engagement Strategy for the university, which I think deliberately and intentionally seeks to make this institution the global player that it is and should be acknowledged to be. So a lot of the international work I do is devoted to advancing the profile of the university in that global context. It's also about understanding the global context for what we do. I mean, your question earlier on about post-truth is relevant here because through those engagements one learns about what is not unique here and what is unique here. And ways in which we can learn from institutions abroad that have gone through similar things. So it's, I find it extremely illuminating. And I do think we do aspire as an institution to have global impact. And therefore it's very important for us to be fully informed about what other institutions are doing. A marvelous example of this is that we're members of the Sustainable Development Goal Cluster around SDG 2. So here we're paired with a university in the global north, global south, and a number of other collaborators, bringing together university expertise to address global poverty through the medium of an international association. And that's one reason why I have a role in that institution, in that association, because I think that convening of universities like ours with partners from around the world is vitally important.
We believe in our hearts that Queen's is a university of choice, in large part because of transformative teaching. And you have said we can no longer safely assume that societies and governments that represent them place a high premium on the pursuit and possession of knowledge. Where does that put universities in general and Queen's in particular?
Well, it poses challenges, obviously. So folks watching might be interested to know there have been surveys done of the level of public trust in institutions for the last decade and a half. for all but the last year or two, I think the pattern has shown a decline in public trust for universities. It maps onto the growth of other kinds of alterations in the political realm in this country. But it's not just a Canadian thing. It's a US thing. It's an issue in the UK as well. So we're already there in a way. That comment I made, we're already in a situation in which the public at large, the electorate, and their elected governments no longer have quite the same faith in institutions of higher learning that they may have had, let's say, 15 or 20 years ago. It's a peculiar thing, though, because what these surveys also show is that families will not hesitate to send their kids to universities, and that they still see attendance at university as an important asset for a career, while at the same time they will articulate a lack or a declining level of confidence in these institutions. I've done this work as a university leader for 25 years. There are cycles to this kind of thing, and I presently certainly do not fear some sort of large-scale desertion of universities by the general public and elected governments. But it is something we have to deal with, because it has budgetary ramifications. What's said out there by politicians does affect the choices people encourage their sons and daughters to make when they're choosing a career. So yes, it's a significant thing, but it's also a cyclical thing. The cycles are not regular. But
when the cycle is on, what can be done to rebuild that confidence in the face of a trust that may be eroding?
Well, what I've often said to alumni, and I remember saying it to members of University Council not so long ago, that the university needs advocates. At one level, the most effective way to alter that climate of declining trust in these institutions is to have people outside of the institution speak up for higher education and all that it represents. And our alumni do that. I think it's wonderful. And eventually you do find governments come around, funding is announced, these kinds of things happen. There are many things universities can and should do in that kind of a situation, but I think important to single out the alumni because they are a vital force for helping to protect not only this university, but the sector, which is so crucial to the functioning level of Canadian democracy and the quality of our society. We should be speaking on behalf of all institutions of higher learning. So that is critically important. Then there's the critical importance of getting to elected leaders themselves and making sure that the university educations many of them had stood them in good stead and is something worth preserving.
Building relationships.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
There was a very specific question about what can alumni do, and I don't know if you want to take it further.
No, I think I answered it. I think alumni are in every respect critical to the university. They can be the voice for the university. They represent the achievement of the university. They in many ways represent the impact of the university because they are one of the instruments by which the institution has impact. And I think mobilizing the alumni, however alumni feel they can contribute, I suppose would be the key point I would want to make in this context. For some, it's speaking up for higher education. For others, it's mobilizing their networks to make sure that people they know in government or in business are able to also pick up the theme and argue for universities. All of those things. And simply by demonstrating the beneficial human effects at both the individual and the societal level of what these institutions provide is critically important.
I'd like to ask you a question now that was given to me by one of our student leaders, our rector, Nikki Boychuk-Hale. And things have moderated. The Ontario government has suspended their tuition freeze. And the question is, given that OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program, has restructured and will now have a maximum of 25% grants and 75% loans versus the previous structure, 85% grants and 15% loans for those most in need, how can Queen's pick up the slack to support current students who committed to a university degree with a different understanding of the level of debt that they would take on and the way they could finance their degrees?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Nikki, for the fine question. Amongst all the items in the government announcement back in February, there was this announcement about changes to Ontario student assistance. And I think everyone recognizes that while the announcements that benefit the universities are much appreciated and welcome, this is a challenge for students. And I think every university, including this one, will want to do their best to moderate the effects of that change. Queen's has a remarkable history in terms of student support and is recognized to have that. And I think we will not only want to continue that, but we will want to enhance it. I'm not sure where we are at this stage, but the Ontario government, regardless of who has been in power, has typically required universities to set aside a certain percentage of new monies that are coming in through tuition increases as part of what's called a student access guarantee. Yeah. And I think most institutions will be prepared to do that at the very least. But I think the point of Nikki's question is a very valid one. It changes the rules on students who are in program right now. It does have potential effects on accessibility. And universities obviously committed to both the good of the students who are currently registered and welcoming students for whom financial challenges may be an impediment. We'll obviously want to do whatever we can to modify that and ameliorate it.
This is a submitted question. What is the biggest change you've noticed at Queen's in your years as principal, which is, you're in year 7 right now out of 10?
Oh dear. I'll remind everybody that those 7 years included COVID, massive financial challenges globally, and now geopolitical conflict. Yes, which of course produced campus unrest in the year preceding this one. So it's actually very difficult with almost any aspect of campus life to identify a single strand and then say, here's the point at which it dramatically increased. I think we've made extraordinary strides in research. We continue there's a lot of work going into raising the research productivity of the university. And, yes, this I would want to comment on. The extent to which the research enterprise involves undergraduates. I've always argued that one of the remarkable things about this place is the quality of the students who come in. They are demonstrably higher on average than students attending most other universities of a similar sort. So if there's any place where undergraduate students can be profitably engaged in the research enterprise, it's here. And I am pleased to say we've made a lot of progress there. So much so that the summer fellowships that support undergraduate students to do that kind of work have quadrupled, quintupled over the years. So I'm really pleased about that. And that's part of an overall effort to embrace a research culture here. It's been an interesting aspect of Queen's evolution because we're configured in many ways to be really good at the kind of liberal arts and science college thing. We've been committed to research intensity since Principal Leggett's time. But we've been slow to make progress on it. But I actually do see progress in that respect. And I've always thought that one key to that is to make the whole of the culture here research-centric, not to see it as a kind of a polarity between the undergrad programs and then this research stuff that goes on somewhat separately. So that has been a remarkable change. I think we've also made some significant advances on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and some of the challenges this institution has historically faced have been dealt with. So there, as on the issue of reconciliation, I think we still have a long way to go. But some things have remained very consistent through that turbulent period. The quality of the undergrads, the excitement of our professors' engagement with them, the vitality, despite COVID, of student government, student life, student clubs. All of that is wonderful and gratifying to see. I suppose the last thing I would say in answer to your question is that given the circumstances, for the institution to have dealt with a budgetary deficit such as it did a couple of years ago, and to be moved now into a much more promising set of circumstances with a bicentennial vision that will guide us, I think that is an extremely positive scenario.
Here is a question that comes from alumni. Again, thank you so much. How does Queen's plan to reposition itself competitively, both within Canada and internationally? And is there a strategy to rebuild its overall brand strength?
That is not one question.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Pick the hard one.
Well, no, I'll say well, obviously we are engaged in building the brand strength of the university. There is really admirable work going on now, which is linked to the bicentennial vision, which is an effort to clarify the brand, to, I want to say, concretize it, infuse it with excitement so that we know where we're heading, and everybody in our community knows where we're heading. So it's one thing to have a document like our bicentennial vision document. What's very important, though, let's say for alumni or for friends of the university outside of the campus, is that they should have an understanding of the brand, what we're trying to do, and so on. And so making that explicit is key. So I think there's a lot of work underway to do that. And as I say, it's all interconnected, the bicentennial vision, all strategic discussions, the brand development, and so on. All of that is critically important. How you position Queen's more prominently on the global stage? A very interesting question. It depends on how you view the global stage. There's the global stage, which is peopled by research-intensive institutions, and those are the institutions who regularly finish at the top of the QS rankings. And those are institutions that are configured to make a global impact in a particular way, particularly through research. So one way in which we can and should be seeking to improve our global standing is through improving our research productivity and the quality of the work we do. That's critically important. But the other consideration is that we need to play to our strengths. This is an institution, the bicentennial makes this very clear, part of the strength of which is derived from our being actually relatively small. So a small institution cannot have multiple areas of major research strength. It has to choose. This is often misunderstood as the suggestion that you're either entirely about research in particle astrophysics, or you're not, or you're entirely committed to, let's say, the humanities. You can't be both. Well, you can be both, right? But the point is you have to have a relatively small number of areas of strength. And so we're building those. The strategic research plan is oriented towards that. And I think that is important. Related to that is that we have other areas in which we do demonstrate our strength on the world stage. And here I'll point to the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, in which we have not fallen out of the top 10 since we began participating. And I forget the number of institutions participating in those rankings now, but I think it's well over 2,500. So Queen's has done exceptionally well, and in many of those years, most of those years, has been the best placed university in Canada. And these are rankings that are derived from our efforts to advance the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So as we approach 2030 and the end of that agenda, it's very satisfying for our university to know that we have been, even though the world is struggling to achieve what was laid out in those goals, we have made a significant contribution to it. And in those rankings, we have been recognized for it. And I think that's related to my point about concentrating your strengths where you know you can contribute. That's one area in which we have. And the global recognition has gone along with it.
There's a question about quantifying research from STEM and from the humanities. How do you sort of say, here's what this is worth in the humanities?
Yeah, this is challenging because the criteria for research accomplishment in the sciences are well established, and it is those criteria that are used for the adjudication of those other rankings, those global rankings. So those rankings most definitely do favor institutions that are heavy on the health sciences and engineering side.
Yet knowledge creation is going on in the arts and the humanities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the institution has to think flexibly about how it understands its research achievement and not adopt mindlessly the criteria for assessment that obtain in those global rankings and other places. Even in this country, in Research InfoSource, right? This is the publication which ranks Canadian universities by their research intensity and gross revenues. And the criteria that obtain there are the same ones that underlie the global rankings. So the institution, if we wish to proceed in our bicentennial year in a way that has the humanities in a proper, integrated, and meaningful relationship with the STEM disciplines, we have to think about an alternate, augmented, or more flexible conception of how we assess and accord recognition for the work done.
A number of questions about finances and the Treasury, but the most basic one is, does Queen's consider itself solvent?
Oh, yes, of course.
Next question.
Yes. Well, remember that the financial challenges that I've discussed at town halls of the sort in the past affect the operating budget of the university. They do not affect the overall financial picture of the university. The endowment is healthy and strong and contributes to the operating budget of the university as it always has. The issue with the operating budget is really about balancing the costs of instructing students and conducting the research we do with the revenues that come in explicitly to do that. And as I think has been widely recognized, our difficulties in doing that have been very much the result of years and years of chronic underfunding. And of course, there are savings we've felt needed to be made, and we've taken steps to accomplish those savings. But overall, no, the institution has and still will have for a while an operating challenge in that the recent government announcements are most welcome. They will help us deal with inflation for at best 2 years. So we have to be doing other things to make the institution sustainable, viable, and capable of achieving what we wish to achieve in in our second century.
And those other things include?
Revenue generation. You cannot keep trimming the operation. You have to find other creative ways of generating revenue that can then be used to enrich the academic programs at the university. And there are models that can be followed for doing that. So yes, we have to continue, I suppose, in summary, we have to continue to manage with caution, and we have to take measures that, where they are necessary and possible and don't have a deleterious effect on the prosecution of the mission of the university, while at the same time putting our energies into revenue generation, which will help augment that. I should say, if anybody on the call reads the Chronicle of Higher Education recently, they will have noticed that not an issue goes by without an article about the brokenness of universities in the 21st century, that the model is broken. The relationship between expenditures and revenues is broken, that some of the underlying assumptions of universities in this tradition are in need of attention. And the most recent issue of the Chronicle offers you 10 versions of a new model for universities, or maybe it's 5. That's quite enough, I think.
Patrick, where does service fit into a Queen's education?
One of the things I love about this institution is its long history of commitment to service. The most obvious parts of it are our involvement in the public service. No institution, I believe, has produced as many governors of the Bank of Canada as we have. Anyone visiting Ottawa will find ministry after ministry peopled with Queen's graduates who have learned not only their skill, but also their commitment to public service here. I remember the stories of Principal Deutsch being driven from the Queen's campus to Ottawa, I think on Thursday nights, where he would advise the Prime Minister on economic policy, and then he'd be driven back here. It's in the nature of this place to be committed. I mean, we established in 1841. That's the same year as the Upper Canada and Lower Canada joined together to form the new country. And we've been contributing to service in this country and more broadly since 1841. So I think it's an essential component of what we do here. For me, the interesting thing is to ask the question of what service looks like in the next century. How does it manifest itself? Nobody's sending a car to get me to drive me to Ottawa to advise the PM on economic policy, and nor are they ever likely to do that. But there are ways in which, and here we get back to the AI discussion, all the other things, there are ways in which I think Queen's historic social mission will naturally transmogrify under the pressures and circumstances of the coming decades. And it's very exciting. It's a very exciting prospect.
We have in conversation about 2 minutes left, maybe not even. Excuse me. And I'd like you to cast your mind over the last year, perhaps, and think of a really joyous event where you felt everything about the university came together in one particular scenario.
Well, there are many such events. I could list, the student awards, convocation ceremonies. Every convocation ceremony is
Dream.
Yes, every convocation ceremony is wonderful. I will say, after COVID, a new practice was instituted of welcoming the new students to campus with an event at Richardson Stadium. And I remember vividly that first class that filled the stadium, the first time really out of their parents' basements, able to embrace everything this place has to offer, and the fabulous social milieu for students at Queen's amply on display. It was a lovely ceremony. That I remember the students much better behaved than they have subsequently become.
Well, that's another subject.
But that's another subject. But it was a lovely occasion.
We have so many more questions. We should really have a Netflix special, I think. Patrick, Queen's is so fortunate, I think, to have you as principal at this time of enormous flux. And thank you for your commitment, your vision, and indeed for this conversation. Principal Patrick Deane.
Thanks very much, Sheila. Thanks, everyone.
And I would like to thank those of you who took the time to tune in online for continuing to support Queen's and for contributing such thoughtful questions. They were wonderful. I hope you enjoyed this hour. Thank you for joining us, and oil thigh.